Well, everyone, welcome to another one of our Wicked Smart webinars. If this is your first one, I am Andy Bonce. I am the marketing director for Midwest Family Madison. I will be your facilitator today. You won't hear a lot from me, so whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I'll let you decide. So today, the topic is going to be the 5 skills you need to make your company more profitable in 2021. We'll get to that in a second, and our awesome guest is here, Michele. Thank you for being here. Before I get to introducing Michele, I added a new slide this week, so I don't have to remember it. So these are going to be recorded, and the slides will be emailed to you by 2 o'clock tomorrow if you're in Central Standard Time. So I do encourage you to ask questions. So if you have an inkling to ask a question or a light bulb moment, we encourage the dialogue and the conversation. So feel free to add it in the chat box. And I will stop Michele and interrupt her rudely.
Please do. I like it.
And answer your question. So now follow us on YouTube. So if you go on YouTube and you type in Midwest Family, you'll find all of the previous Wicked Smart webinars and this one by the end of the day tomorrow. And you can take a look at and subscribe to that and like and comment as much as you can so we can get a little bit of Google clout going on out there. And then also follow us on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn page, the Midwest Family of Companies. We share we'd like to promote the future Wicked Smart webinar stuff on there and a lot of other good content. So we would love you to follow us there and connect. And if you are a Twitter person, I don't know. Please use these hashtags, Great Local Brands or hashtag Midwest Family. If you have any good quotes or quotables or key takeaways that you'd love to share in your own personal social media, those are the hashtags. That would be great if you could use those. So now on to the main event. So Michele, she is another one of our second time speaking guests. She's a professional EOS implementer or Entrepreneurial Operating System implementer. And she'll do a much better job explaining that than I will, but essentially they have systems that are proven and tested for entrepreneurs. So, and they have a lot of framework and worksheets and all kinds of scientific and examples and stuff, frameworks that you can use as a business owner. And people like me who love systems and processes, I love it. So today, what she's going to be covering is the 5 simple leadership skills that will enhance your fulfillment at work, how to simplify your work life and improve your ability to delegate, and to learn the framework to build systems and structures that will set your company up for record profits. Michele is visiting us from, I think, Michigan today, right?
Yes. Southwest corner.
Yeah, I will stop my share and let you take over.
All right.
Relinquish my
your control.
my power and my control to you. So
there you go. I like it. Thank you very much. So yeah, I was going to say something. Is that when you're talking about Twitter, I'm like, well, at least you're not a twit, right? We don't want to be, if you're a twit, you don't do that. So we know everyone's not that. So we're hopefully that no one's thinking that they're that. So, well, again, I'm Michele Mollard. I own a company called Sherpa, and Andy did a great job there. We have an operating system is a simple, practical tools that set entrepreneurs up in a good foundation, right? So just the concept of building a house well, you got to set that foundation well. And so we help entrepreneurs do that. This piece today that I'm going to share with you, the 5 leadership abilities to bust through the ceiling or when you're stuck, it comes from one component of this model. But honestly, these skills I've actually used in times prior to being an implementer for them. And so I actually was talking about it social media this morning, and many of them can be used personally too. So if you're at the same situation, personally, you can use the ability to simplify to get unstuck in your life. So I'm going to jump right in. Actually, I'm going to start my clock so I make sure that I am on Andy's time and so I don't mess up all this whole thing here. So well, now, of course, my little advanced screen doesn't want to go. There we go. So again, hitting the ceiling. What is it? What does it mean? And those pieces. So let's start a little bit of a background so we know where we are. So hitting the ceiling is definitely when your department, your company is stuck, right? Is stopped growing. And so that's what we mean with hitting the ceiling in this case, right? There's many other cases where we hit the ceiling and we talk about busting through the glass ceiling as women and getting into the executive seats. But this is what we call hitting the ceiling corporately. So again, it is all these skills that we learned today you can take control of, even if you're not a department head or if you are a department head or an owner. This is also a skill that I've actually taught some of the employees that have reporting to me how to manage their progress going forward. So it is inevitable. It will always happen and it'll always happen often. So again, it's a feeling of being stuck. It's a feeling of being overwhelmed and frustrated, right? And so when we feel that way, how do we do this? And so again, a little bit of more background, because it's inevitable. If you can, I try to make this little blue line bigger because I know on Zooms and sometimes it's hard to see, but there's a little blue line going up like this. If you can't see it, it'll become a little bit apparent as we go. But organizations, you as a person, a department, you're climbing and climbing and climbing. And that is what we call the evolution part. But sometimes you hit this horizontal line that we call the revolution line. And so how do we bust through that revolution, and how do we do that? And how do we keep climbing? And then how do we get through that revolution? So again, it happens over and over again. Sometimes that span is very short, like the very beginning. Sometimes that span is really long. So we can't really predict when it's going to happen necessarily, but we can build skills to bust through that. So that gives us a framework for these 5 leadership abilities and what they are. So let's jump right in. These are the 5. And I have in orange very specifically master them. It takes time to master them. This is not a one and done. This is not a secret sauce that you dump in and I've got it. Check the box, it's done. It is a development and it's a skill that we develop over time. And you get better and faster and stronger at it. And therefore you can bust through that ceiling better, stronger, faster from time to time. So let's jump right into the first one and let's do your ability to simplify, right? So if you have one person in the organization and then you have another person in an organization, you should have like bouncing heads on the right-hand side of your screen coming in there and little smiley faces. You have 2 ways of communication, right? It's not that complex, but as soon as we add one more person, just one more person, it doesn't increase it, just double it. You have another way of communication. So your complexity, no matter if you add one person or now if we add 4, you can see how all the arrows would go. So you could double in size, but the complexity, communication, messaging, sharing the vision, all those things quadruple in every organization. It is inherently how it goes. It is always an inevitable, right? So I remember I told you at the very beginning, it's inevitable. So I'm going to go into each one of these and talk about the why we want to build this skill to simplify it, and then the how. Because sometimes I get into these webinars, even myself, and I hear a lot of why, and I'm like, tell me how. So we're going to share with you how, and we're really going to ask you guys to take some of the hows and implement them. I have, I'll fess up here, Michele Mollard, I have sat in on webinars that I've done nothing with the knowledge, and I'm really, really going to press upon you, do something with the knowledge, and we'll talk about it at the end. We leave a little extra time, even more for Q&A, but I want to hear from you guys about what are your takeaways? How do we do this? So here's the why, right? So great leaders keep things simple. Why? Because they're always, they can always eliminate the complexity of it. And that's the why we want to do it. So we want to keep things simple to eliminate the complexity. And how we're going to do that and where we're going to do that is we're going to simplify messages and processes. And again, you guys can read. So I really want to take apart 2 pieces of this and talk about the messages. So I was actually going to use a different example, but this happened literally on Tuesday. I have a client of mine that right now his messages are not simplified, and he's asked me to evaluate it and help him. And so he sent a message out to 30 people. And then I had a conversation with him about, okay, tell me why this message went out and what was going on. We deducted it down that really that message needed to go to 3 people. And I said to him, it took me 5 minutes to read that. 27 people did not, arguably by his confession, did not need that email. It's 135 minutes of wasted time out of his organization. He happened to be the owner and the leader of the organization. And it was just like an aha moment, right? So how do we just take that message and make it really simple and say, let's just have that conversation with 3 people and not 27 other people that don't need it. And the funny thing is, the next day he sent me an email and he says, 2 people came to me and said, I thought I was doing this right. What am I doing wrong? Why did I get this email? Right? So simplifying that thing so it adds not confusion, right? We don't want to add confusion to the organization as well. The vision component or the vision piece, you can do the same thing. Making sure that a potential client has 16 core values. And I asked the 4 people at the leadership table that recite the 16 core values. Between all 4 of them, none of them, like collectively, they did not get them. Right? So simplify that vision that you're trying to cascade to your team and really make that come to life to them, right? So if it's so complex that their leaders can't recite the 16 core values, then they're not worth the paper they're printed on. So really, again, we'll talk a little bit about actually structure later on, but processes seem to be something we can grab onto and simplify easier. And we'll talk a little bit about those 2. And so that's why I just wanted to share with that. So again, the why is that it eliminates complexity. The how is let's make sure we're looking at it, fine tune messages and structure and the vision and really getting into that and making sure it's really simple and clear for them. So the next one, the second skill is calling master of delegate and elevate. And I know that some people are like, yeah, I've heard this. I don't have an infinite amount of resources to hire everybody an assistant. Well, let me stop you there. And it doesn't need that. And so let me run through this with you again, the why and the how of why to delegate and elevate and then how. So the delegation is truly to get to your true skill set or what I call your unique abilities, right? And so what do you do best? What do you love and do best? And that's what we need to work towards. Now, all of us don't have the ability to delegate everything we hate off our plate. Don't get me wrong, right? We're all, that's not true. But it's really, really trying your hardest to do that. And I'll show you some examples. So that's the why, right? Arguably, we don't have 24 hours and 40 minutes. We have 24 hours in the day, no matter what, right? So we can't change that. So how do we do this? So we would all like to get paid for, 40 hours, 50 hours and work 10. But let's be realistic on this is if our job takes us 50 hours to do, right? So our work week is 50 hours, but it's taking us physically 60 hours to do, right? And so there's 10 hours of time that is extra that arguably we don't want to dedicate to it. So let's just use this as the example as we run through this and get better at this. How do we get that off your plate, right? And get it completely out of there. And so again, I wish that I could have an assistant and I could just send everything that I don't like to do and don't do well off to them, but we have to use a little bit more skill at that and kind of evaluate that is. So if you will, as you guys are listening to it, take a separate piece of paper and divide it into 4. And so it's easier to show you 2 and 2 on Zoom, right? But ideally, this is one piece of paper divided into 4 quadrants. The upper left-hand corner is what you love and are great at. The upper right-hand corner is what you like and you're good at. The bottom left, don't like and are good at. The bottom right, don't like and not good at. And so, and I can go back a screen here so you guys can write that down. But so what, again, this is the how, right? So as you're going through this, I would say tomorrow, start recording everything that you do tomorrow in one of these 4 quadrants. And so what you love and are great at is your true skill set, is your unique ability, right? It is in your job. It is what you love and you're great at. And then the bottom quadrant, in the bottom quadrant, there's going to be things definitely in the bottom 2 of these, but definitely don't like and not good at. So let me give you an example for me. I set up usually 5 to 7 meetings every single day, and that's how I run my practice in my world. I don't love sending emails back and forth, trying to set up times. So I use an app called Calendly, right? There's a ton of scheduling tools out there that you can use. And so that people can just go on my calendar and find times, whatever time they want. If they want 15 minutes or an hour, they can pick that and do that. And so I don't have to go back and forth. So again, the how to do this is not an assistant necessarily. What's the small tool that's free that I can use to do that as well? Another example is when I walked into a job, there was reports to do. And so when I talked to the owner, I said, what are these reports? What do they do? How do I use them with my team? And so he gave me the understanding, went to my team, found out my team doesn't use them at all. And so back and forth, going back and forth, not trying to disrespect the owner and trying to make sure we're using tools well, but I eliminated half of those reports, 30 minutes a week off of my calendar because of just looking at something that they've historically done for the last 10 years that no one uses, or it's not pertinent information to them. So look at those pieces that it's easier to categorize them and then take them one at a time. And that's why I said on this bottom 2 quadrants, which you don't like it or good at, and don't like it, not good at, look at trying to delegate those and elevate those. So delegate them, to a tool off completely, and then you elevate yourself, right? So it's an elevation of yourself to your true and unique ability. So again, that's the why and the how of delegate and elevate, the second leadership ability to be able to bust through that ceiling. And again, you guys can do this again individually as a department head or as an organization or a leader of the organization. The ability to predict is the third one. And so we looked at this in 2 different ways. Again, the why is mastering this. So why do we need to have the ability to predict? And when we break them down, we talk about predicting long-term and short-term. But the why is this. You'll have much more direction and the ability to prioritize if you're able to predict what it is. So again, this is the why. And here's the how. So long-term, if we look at long-term predicting, it's 90 days and out, just like I said before. So what is the major projects that you need to do? So for an example, if you decide that a CRM, right, so a customer relationship management tool is needed for your organization to be able to move forward, that is a long-term project. It's not something I would hope, maybe, maybe there is, that you're going to decide up. I'm just going to grab the first one I see on when I Google it, and I'm going to sign up for it, right? There's some research about features and benefits, costs, those things. So what we say is grab the most important thing that needs to get done and then put a timeline to it. This is really just a time management thing, the ability to predict and prioritize that. But then what we lose track of is if we put a timeline and say, okay, that's going to be done in 90 days, we don't stop immediately and say, what are the major steps to that? We say, okay, that's going to be due in 90 days. I got plenty of time. And then all of a sudden, kind of like what Andy and I were talking about at the beginning, that time flies. That first 60 days flies past. Now you're 30 days out for a huge project that arguably, with all its gusto, should have taken 90 days, right? Maybe not 90 every day, right? Not your whole entire workday. But so what I'm saying is spend 3 hours, 2 hours, once you've defined what that most important thing is and the date, to get your major steps down. And then you're like, oh, those major steps, I can get those done in 30 days. But it's a conscious decision to be able to make that decision, whether you can get it done in 30 days. And then time chunking. Again, guys, this is not rocket science, right? We're talking about predicting that, but also prioritizing it, chunking it. So 2 or 3 hours each day to work on that rock. So if you decide that it needs to start in 60 days out, then back the schedule up and chunk time and say, CRM work. It doesn't have to be very specific, right? So you might have a to-do on that or a little table to do on that, but just chunk that time and then hold that time. It's really, really important that is just as important with a level or a meeting with your leaders or a meeting with your team. It is unbreakable. From that standpoint. So again, that's how on the long term. And then what we talk about short term is solving daily issues. So predicting issues that may come up, and we all solve daily issues, but sometimes we don't get to the root cause of it. So your ability to predict will those issues and get to the root cause will bust you through that ceiling faster, because sometimes we're solving issues that are really just the symptoms and not the root cause. And so once we think we're at the root cause, I'm just going to say, dig, and ask why. Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? And kids do this all the time, but why? But why? And it frustrates us as parents, but they're learning. They're really trying to figure out what's going on and what I can and cannot do. As adults, we kind of lose that ability to be inquisitive and ask why. So dig down into the issues that come up to make sure you're getting the root cause. And then, of course, discuss it for others for input and diversity. So a yes and, right? You think you might have an answer, but what does that look like? Is that where it really is? And you'd be surprised about the yes and. That's a great idea. And what about this? That's a great idea. And what about this? And it builds into a greater project or a greater ability to solve the problem, to get unstuck, to get unoverwhelmed to get not so overwhelmed, right? And then this is where we also fall short a little bit, is making a to-do list to get it, what we say, to done, right? And so, and it's the accountability piece. So if you spread the wealth, right? So talking about not my monkeys, not my circus, but if you have a project, like if you delegate that to other people, then how do we bring that all back around, right? So if I give Andy and Teresa a to do, and they're on my team, how do I go to Andy? Are we done? Are we good? Or he reports back because he needs to, right? And so how do we make sure all those things come done and get done? And it's not a check because I don't trust Andy. It's a check that, okay, this team is doing well. We're here, we're meeting these milestones, and then let's go, right? So we can all make sure that our individual projects are getting done for the greater good of the project or the issue that's at hand. So that's the ability to predict short-term, long-term, how we can get it done, breaking it down into smaller chunks from there. And then the ability to systemize. So this ability, again, the why is we need to simplify getting things done in a handful of what we call core processes, right? So, or processes, whatever you want. It's the way you get things done, the right way, the best way. So I always use the kind of an example of HR, right? We kind of all know we have to post jobs somewhere. We have to tell the world we need people, but sometimes we don't know where to do that at. So we really need to just grab it. And so we use a little bit different philosophy. And the reason why we do that is in our world, entrepreneurs typically have zero processes written. And so we really press upon to them to use what we call a 20-80. And yeah, that's right, is a 20-80 approach. Everyone always hears the 80-20 rule. It's opposite for us. Document 20% that gets you 80% there, especially if you don't have anything done. Right now, if you're on this call and your company is ISO 9000 or whatever the newest, latest, this doesn't apply. You've got to document everything. You've got to do your thing. If you're Six Sigma, Lean certified, all of those things, I get it. There are places for this, but in the mindset of if there's nothing done, then get something done, right? So if that person knows they have to post a job, but you're looking for an executive and he's posting it on Craigslist, which if you're really young out there in the audience, probably don't even know what the heck that is. It was an old way to sell goods. I think it's out there still. I don't know, somebody correct me. Thanks, Andy. I'm dating myself, aren't I? But you're putting it out on Craigslist for an executive in New York City, you're probably not getting the best candidates, right? So what are those steps that we need to teach them that maybe LinkedIn or maybe Indeed or a recruiter or an executive recruiter may be the better steps? And so how do we define that to get us the 80% results, right? And so we tell people that I've told them 4 or 5 times that they're not doing it right. Well, how do they learn, right? So if they're learning by example, or they're learning by reading, how do we make sure we're doing that? And so that is the point of this, is documenting that piece. So systemize your process. And so it doesn't stop there. It's what we call followed by all. So are they trained and managed to follow that process and no exceptions to it, right? And so all of that equals consistency. So you can manage people, the process, all of those things better. We're talking about profitability, right? And so the title of this thing is how do we become more profitable to this, right? And so how do we manage that? And so if Andy and I are in business together and Teresa's with us, and Teresa's my sister and she's in sales and Andy's in sales, and I manage them both, and I let Teresa run amok. She does what she does, and I have Andy following a process. We're not probably getting the results maybe out of Teresa, and arguably we're not getting the results out of Andy because he's following the process and he's frustrated because he has to follow this process and Teresa doesn't, right? So we talk about enjoyment, we talk about results, all of those things all build into this. So anything that you can systemize and build in consistency will ultimately give you better results. And then your ability to predict, which if you remember was the third, leadership ability. And so you can kind of see how these things are all building on each other. And if you can really, really perfect them, it gets you better, faster, stronger into profitability. And the slide said for 2021, clearly we're all focused on 2021, but it's forever, right? This journey that you're on to master these only get stronger if you keep working the muscle, right? It's more of a muscle memory that you're building this new muscle and this new tool from there. So this is a great saying. I'll pause and you guys can read it. So what we mean by this is I can systemize a process so that I can celebrate the human success, right? So I can be that person's cheerleader and cheer them on to a systemized process that they're doing really well. And so instead of the opposite of saying, you can't do it right, you're still not doing it right, you're still not doing it right, systemize the predictable so we can humanize the exceptional. And that is really what that leadership ability is talking about, is really how do we elevate somebody to the next game? And if we can set up things and systemize things, we can get them there stronger and faster and better. And they're happier, right? People like systems. I mean, there's some people that really like systems, like Andy, but there's other of us that really, we really do like something, right? And some of us like guardrails on a highway. Some of us are like a 2-lane road. We need those guardrails, right? So it just depends. And you got to know that as a manager. But it's always that kind of that humanizing that exceptional from there. So the last one, we're doing okay on time. We are doing okay on time. The last one is structure. And so the ability to structure, and again, this is going to sound like it's coming from you have to be a leader in the organization or an owner in the organization to restructure. I challenge you to lead up, to manage up. And if you are a department head and what I'm going to describe to be about structure is not right, just let's start with your department, then have a discussion, hopefully that it's open and honest culture and environment that you can have a discussion to try to get this better within your organization or at least within your department. So why do we want to structure first? So we need to structure first to make sure that it's the best way and the right way for that organization. So sometimes we have it, especially in family-run organizations, that I've got my brother in there, and he's got this job, and I make a job description that fits his personality, right? But it's not getting us to the next level because it's based on his ego, his personality, his the person that he is versus the roles and responsibilities that I really need him to do. And so we're building in a seat at the table that is not helping us get further. It's not helping us rise above or look at the big picture of what do we expect and what do I need them to be held accountable to and really be able to do that, right? So that's the why we need to have structure. How do we do this? Structure first, people second. Again, remember taking out the ego, taking out the personalities for this is we believe that, and it's going to look a little bit differently, but in essence, every organization has a marketing or sales department, an operations department. And then on the right, if your faces are in front of it, it's the finance department, right? And then sometimes it breaks down into marketing, sales. Maybe at this level, there's marketing and sales in there. But first, we structure first. So once we figure out what that looks like, and so let's just use this as an example, that we have a head of marketing, sales, head of ops, and a head of finance. We say, what are those 5 roles and responsibilities that they are held accountable? Only 5. All your details can go in your job descriptions. What are those major things that if they're not doing, that department is not successful too, right? And so then we say, okay, what is the next level? And so of course you arguably break out marketing and sales. Maybe there's just sales and marketing stays and all the kind of daily execution stays at that the top level, and sales is broken down, right? So it just depends on how you structure your organization. But in operations, then there's a build, there's a ship and install of the product, the services that we're offering, a deliverable, an implementation, right? So whatever that looks like. And then sometimes finance breaks down into HR and IT. So again, at this level, we're going to define those 5 roles and responsibilities. So let's say you're the head of ops and you are really looking at this, feeling this structure is a little bit dysfunctional. Own that. Try to really figure out, and again, this is the how, is figure out what 5 roles and responsibilities that you're being held accountable to, that you need to report to the owner of the organization, and then do that same, I would arguably say, with your team. So if I have a guy or girl that's heading up the build, right, this little build box, if they're heading up that, how do I work with them to define the 5 roles and responsibilities? Those that are heading up the shipping department, and how do we ship it? How do we install it? Do the same thing. So again, we're defining what the organization needs to be successful, to bust through that ceiling, and then we're putting people in there. So then let's just say that I am not doing my job well. I'm the head of marketing and sales, and I am not hitting those roles and responsibilities that are listed there. You end up with people issues and people that are in the wrong seat. And so what do we mean by the wrong seat? So they cannot execute those 5 roles and responsibilities. Sometimes they can find a new seat. So the whole concept of Peter principle, right? So we have taken the best salesperson and we have put them up to the top of the marketing and sales department. And then we say, oh, but they have no ability to lead people, to manage people, and hold people accountable. But they are our best salesperson, and we put them there. They should be able to do this job. Fantastic, right? That's taking a personality or a person and putting them there because they're great, because you think you need to promote them. But they don't have the ability to execute those roles. And usually the first one is usually lead, manage, and hold people accountable. And so you've lost twice. You've lost your best salesperson, then you've lost in that transition to the sales manager, right? And then honestly, you've probably lost some sales staff too, because he's now not done his job as a leader to build them up. And so then we have to ask that person to leave the organization. Now we've really lost, right? So we end up with those people issues. So those are the 5 roles and responsibilities to bust through the ceiling, to really get to the top of your game. And again, I share this with you, one, because I'm passionate about it, and hopefully that's coming through. And I'm excited that I didn't talk too much, because sometimes I get really, really passionate and I whoop right off on a tangent and I go squirrel, and here we go. But you can do this in anything. Like I've done this personally, right? Your life gets so complex at home. What are we doing? Why are we doing all these things? I reduced my complexity with the amount of boards. What am I passionate about as a board on the boards? Like I was on 7 or 8 of them, and I was all over the place. And so I had to look at that and say, okay, the Delegate and Elevate tool, I was spending too much time doing that. I simplified the amount of it. I now know where I'm going. I systemized it, I structured it, and I go. So know that this also can happen and work for you personally, as well as professionally. And again, one thing I will really strive, and I would love, we have an extra few minutes here. I would love to know about takeaways. That is my biggest thing about it, is like, what are you going to do tomorrow? And what tools are you going to use tomorrow to be able to get you there? And even if it's not specifically here, if it's had an aha moment or a light bulb went off, I'd love to just kind of hear that. So I think I'll turn it over to Andy and see what we've got out there for next steps and takeaways. So thank you.
All right. So if you have a question, I encourage you to put it in the chat box. I wrote down something while you guys are formulating your questions. So one of my favorite quotes is from Jim Rohn, and he talks about to focus on the process and not the results. And what I wrote down is leadership is you have to internalize that for yourself, but I think in leadership, you have to help people and build systems so people can focus on the process if you want to experience results. So alongside that question, how do all of these things connect to more profit? Michele.
Gotcha. Yeah. So if you take them one at a time, and I can fly through, but you'll see the really ones on the one. So let's say to simplify, right? So the example that I used, I wasted 135 minutes, right, of time. They could have been doing something else, right? So if they were doing something in that email that we sent to 30 people, 27 of them didn't need it. They could have spent that 5 minutes somewhere else. So getting them more, I don't know, maybe they made one extra call in the sales department that day. So they closed another deal, right? They had the ability and the time to close another deal. So definitely more profit in there. The ability to predict is really the biggest one that I think probably hits the profitability the most. Is if you keep long-term, if you keep missing the mark of executing on bigger projects that you need to get done. So if your leadership team or you determine that a CRM is going to increase the efficiency of your customer service department, your sales department, having that details in there, and you continue to put that off and kind of kick the can down the road, you're putting off all your profitability in that piece, right? So if you say, okay, hey, it's going to make us, we'll have to spend money to make money. So we're going to have to spend, I don't know. I mean, some of them, right? HubSpot, it's free, right? But it's very basic, right? But sometimes you have to spend a little bit of money, but okay, so it's spend $5,000, but we're predicting the fact that it's going to bring in $35,000 or $100,000, and we keep kicking that can down the road and not execute that one. You know, that's kind of how it relates to profitability in those pieces. All of them will do that, but those are two of the biggest ones.
Awesome.
Does that answer your question, Andy?
Yeah, it does. I think that, you know, I can connect the dots, but I think it's nice to be able to answer that question, because again, I guess when you mentioned the why should I?
Yeah.
You know, because I know, like someone like myself, I like systems and processes and kind of building things around that, but not everybody's like that. Some people just want to get out there and do. Some people just want to go out and create and things like that. So
it's kind of like putting a second story on a house before you build the foundation. Like, right? It's, I mean, in essence, right? That's what's hard about that is, you know, we want to see the end results. You know, I love seeing drywall go up, that we're really close to done. But if we put that on a rickety foundation, that's kind of where it all gets at.
Cool. And would you mind stop sharing so I can?
Sorry. Thank you. I appreciate you. I always forget that. That's why we always have other leaders in these things. Thank you, Andy.
So, well, if there are questions, I encourage you to put them in the chat box there. While you're doing that, I want to talk about our next Wicked Smart webinar. So our next guest is a gentleman by the name of Chuck Mefford. He has 3 books out there, all on branding. He's a big personality. He tells great stories. And he's going to be talking about branding strategies that build legacy businesses. So here's some of the steps that he's going to talk about, or stories he's going to tell you. These strategies helped a pest control dude with a Camaro and a spray can turn over to over 8 million a year in 53 shiny red trucks. There's another story I'll talk about on the impact he had on a dealership in his state there. And then one of the stories from Northwest Wisconsin, he helped a dentist grow to over $10 million for one location. So he's got a big personality, and he is very relatable, and he's funny. So I did with family. We know Chuck well, but if you have not heard Chuck speak, I encourage you to come 2 weeks from now and check him out. So I'm not seeing any other questions right now. So if anyone else has any questions, feel free to ask. But if you have any questions, you can also email TK at that email there. You can also follow Michelle on LinkedIn. I know she's on LinkedIn. We're connected on there. So, but I'm not seeing any questions. So if you think that you must have just done such a good job answering.
Well, and so you're letting me off easy. I'm not sure it was that good of it, but yeah, again, my plea is just do something with it, make some time tomorrow and get something done, move forward, and you'll see the results. So awesome. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Teresa. I really appreciate you guys. I don't know. It's an honor to be a second. I didn't know until just now that I was one of the few that came to back again. So I appreciate it. I really do.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Michelle. We loved having you, and see everybody in 2 weeks.